Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're grabbing our magnifying glasses and diving headfirst into a linguistic mystery buried deep inside the New Testament. We're about to investigate a set of ancient letters that are filled with these cryptic warnings. And by looking closely, we're going to uncover an entire ideological war that was fought not with swords, but with words. Okay, let's dive right in. Our entire investigation is going to center on three specific books in the New Testament, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. You'll often hear these three referred to as the pastoral epistles. Now, traditionally, these letters are said to have been written by the Apostle Paul, though, a lot of modern scholars actually debate that. But for what we're doing today, think of these letters as our case file. They are packed with these urgent warnings about a dangerous false teaching. And here's the cool part. The specific words the author uses, those are the fingerprints we're going to use to figure out who the bad guy is. So let's get to our first and, honestly, our most direct piece of evidence. It's a critical phrase that comes from that first letter to Timothy. The author gives this really stark command, right? He says, to avoid the contradictions of what is falsely called knowledge. That last little bit, that's the key. And to really get why it's so important, we have to look at the original Greek word. Okay, so the Greek word here is gnosis. Now, gnosis does mean knowledge, but we're not talking about, knowing facts for a test. In this context, gnosis refers to a special, secret, almost mystical kind of spiritual insight that some people believed was absolutely essential to be saved. And this right here just illustrates that connection perfectly. The word Gnostic wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It comes directly from that Greek word, gnosis. So whenever you hear the term Gnostic, you can literally just think of them as the people who are all about the knowledge. So here's the crucial point. By specifically attacking falsely called gnosis, the author isn't being subtle at all. He is taking a direct shot at the absolute core idea of the people we call the Gnostics. Okay, now this next clue is where things get really, really interesting. This is how a single specific word can help us narrow down our search from this big, broad movement to the ideas of one very specific and very influential person. So let's go back to that same verse, 1 Timothy 6:20. It doesn't just warn against false knowledge, right? It also tells Timothy to avoid contradictions. Well, the Greek word for contradictions is antithesis. And that very specific word, antithesis, it's like a giant flashing arrow pointing us directly to this major figure from the 2nd century named Marcion of Sinope. Marcion was pushing some seriously radical ideas. His main thing was that the God from the Old Testament was a totally different, kind of wrathful, lesser being than the loving Father of Jesus Christ. And here it is. This is the linguistic bullseye, Marcion's most famous work, the text where he laid out all these passages from the Old and New Testaments to prove how much they contradicted each other. What did he title it? He called it the antitheses. I mean, come on, that is not a coincidence. It's a direct linguistic hit on the warning in the letter. All right, let's move on to our third clue. This one is really going to help us build a more detailed picture of what these Gnostic teachers were actually saying and why the author of the pastorals was so concerned. So earlier in that same letter, the author issues another warning. This time, he's telling his followers not to waste their time with myths and endless genealogies. Now, you might hear endless genealogies and think he's just warning people not to get lost in their family tree on some website. But no. This is actually a very specific jab at the Gnostic super complex and frankly kind of bizarre view of how the universe works. You see, Gnostics taught that our whole physical world was basically a cosmic accident. They believed that from a true, perfect God, a whole series of divine beings, which they called aeons, sort of flowed out, creating this kind of divine family tree. A big mistake by the last of these aeons, a being named Sophia, led to the creation of a flawed, lesser God. And that God is the one who created our imperfect material world. Those were the endless genealogies the author was fighting against. So you're faced with this incredibly complex Gnostic system. What do you do? Well, the author of the pastorals didn't just go on the attack. They also played defense. They built what you could call a linguistic firewall. And they did it by changing the very meaning of key religious words. So let's take the word faith. That's pistis in Greek. In the letters we're sure Paul wrote, it almost always means this personal, trusting acceptance of Christ. It's an action. But here, in the pastorals, it shifts. It becomes the faith, a solid, defined body of teaching. It's not just something you do, it's something you guard. It's a creed. And you see the exact same thing happen with a word like righteous. For Paul, that's a big theological idea. It's about a person's legal standing before God. But in the pastorals, its meaning gets a lot more down to earth. It just means being a good, upright, moral person. This shift was a brilliant move because it put the focus back on good behavior, directly countering the Gnostics who prize secret knowledge above all else. Okay, so when we put all of this linguistic evidence together, I'm talking the direct hits, the specific name drops, the clever defensive wordplay, the verdict becomes pretty darn clear. The linguistic fingerprints are just everywhere. You have the direct shot at gnosis. You have the very specific reference to antitheses. You've got the critique of endless genealogies, and then this redefinition of core terms. It all paints a picture of the pastoral epistles as this carefully constructed playbook for how to identify and fight back against the teachings of early Gnosticism. And that really just leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? This ancient text is a powerful reminder that some of history's greatest and most important conflicts weren't fought with swords and shields, but with sentences and definitions. The words we choose to use and the meanings we give them, they have the power to define reality itself and shape the future.